You all been issued boarding passes when you came in. They're numbered, so people between numbers 1 to 10, please, who want to ask a question, come on up and you'll get the microphone in your numerical order. If nobody
it's the most organized place I've ever been in my life.
Gordon, I have a number.
Oh, okay. You're number 10.
Well, there wasn't one. We had it, but I lost it. So we took another thing.
I'll take
your word is good with me. I'll let you go.
You know, you can tell a room of Democrats.
All right. Number 2 and number 10. Okay, number 1.
Go ahead. Number 1.
All right. You have to kind of speak into the microphone, really, like that.
Okay, I'm kind of embarrassed about this, but, you know, why have, Mitch McConnell made a statement that the goal of the Republican Party, or maybe it was his goal, was to make Obama a one-time president. Can't somebody bring that up and say he didn't say that a goal would be to make the United States stronger? The goal would be to make our general public happier or anything, pursuit of happiness and all that kind of stuff. So the reason I'm asking, I know that we're not getting the same commercials that are being run through the Midwest, but are there any commercials or anything coming out proving the fact that this man, has really verbally in front of God and the world said this is what his goal is, leaving out the rest of us?
Well, thank you. He made it very clear, and it's been widely publicized now for 4 years because he said it at the outset of the Obama administration that it was about the president failing and not getting a second term. As many differences I had with George Bush, I worked with him on obviously a number of issues, but I didn't, I never rooted for the president of the United States to fail. I always thought the two things went together, the country and the president more or less went together. But Mitch McConnell meant it when he said it, and he's done everything in his power to prevent these issues coming to the floor. Very, very important issues, whether it's it's providing help for people who are in trouble with their mortgages, or whether it's most recently the highway bill, where he finally just was out snookered and had to let a vote take place on that legislation on campaign finance reform. We passed this legislation, campaign finance reform, a rather substantial reform during when George Bush was president, but it was vetoed, and we passed it. We passed the disclosed bill in the House, but Mitch McConnell would not let it come up for a vote in the Senate. We know now why, because they're relying very, very heavily on huge amounts of anonymous, undisclosed money. These super PACs are being set up for this purpose. The Chamber of Commerce is running where they guarantee their members who contribute to the super PAC that they will not be disclosed. We know that at least one insurance company that was in there contributing their money and saying they wanted this to work against the health care bill, even though they publicly supported it, but somebody was in the room and reported that. But the whole point is anonymous. I just have this point to make, and Mark talked about this earlier. I don't know, in a huge, complex, diverse democracy that we have become, this is no longer just about the Northern Europeans. This is a huge, diverse democracy. How you maintain that democracy, how you maintain the authority of the government and the integrity of the government if you have secret money. This is what you do in dictatorships. This is what you do. This is what you do. You still have places where guys, it's usually the guys want to call themselves king or something, but I mean, this is what you do. You take a cut of everything and you give nothing back to the people. But in a democracy, we can't function without transparency. Another form of government can function without transparency, but we can't. And I'm telling you, I think, I honestly believe that after this election, whatever the outcome, and people start to see the autopsy of what took place here and the money that came into this campaign and the secret nature of this of this money. We see it already, and we've been up against it in special elections, you know, where there's been a vacancy in the House in this last year. But I think this is the most threatening thing to our democracy, the most threatening thing, because I don't know how I tell people. I mean, most people now believe, after the financial scandals on Wall Street and many of the continuing financial scandals, they truly believe, and there's very good reason for them to do so, that this system is rigged against them. You know, people will say to me, when is my family too big to fail? When is my family too big to fail? And now you put secret money in this. And how do people have confidence in Washington, D.C.? How do they have confidence in the Congress and the Senate and the President of the United States? You know, if you just had these amounts of money, people would lose their confidence. But when they don't know where it came from, Mark can maybe run through this better, but we had these two initiatives. One was to overturn our climate change bill. It was leading in the polls until the moment it was disclosed that the Koch brothers and their out-of-state oil companies were the major funders. The polls whipped around, am I right? Yep. Whipped around, and thank you all for voting to hold on to our climate change legislation and the laws in this country. The second one was this little effort that one of the communities in Marin wanted to have a public power, a community power. Yeah. And so all the ads came out beforehand, and they said, they're trying to deny competition, they're trying to stifle competition, this is anti-competition, anti-business, yada, 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 right?
$50 million.
$50 million, and it was winning. I mean, that proposition to keep the community in Marin County from doing that was winning until it was disclosed that PG&E at that time had put up $42 million, eventually $50 million, and the people said, the hell with this. Talk about competition. That's disclosure. That's transparency. How do you support a president if you don't know who's supporting the president? How do you support a proposition on a ballot if you don't know who's supporting it? This is a huge issue. This is a huge issue in the future of our country.
And the question, as a former Republican, the only Republican George Miller ever endorsed, really pissed them off.
Former's the important word.
And somebody who left. What's happened in the Republican Party, which is really bad in the country that you allude to, and the whole idea that Mitch McConnell would say, our #1 goal is to make sure the President of the United States fails. And as George said, a lot of us had really serious differences with W, but we didn't hope he failed. I mean, it's just so contrary to what we all hope for one another. We're Americans before we're anything else. Yesterday, I had a good friend who's an assembly member Republican. I grew up in Massachusetts. He's a Red Sox fan, and I am too. He's a very decorated Vietnam veteran, a colonel in the Marine Corps. He's running for Congress right now in a Republican district, and he's getting killed by a Tea Party candidate. As being, you know, as he said to me, this is a Minuteman who's trying, and he has a bill in my committee to make it safer for kids to ride motorcycles off-road. And they're saying it's an anti-government, he's a moderate, he's trying to tell kids how to ride their motorcycles off-road. And poor Paul comes in, he's just a wonderful man, and I would never question his credentials as a conservative. But they're ripping his heart apart. They're accusing him of having leukemia, and these are Tea Party militia people. And as Paul said, the closest thing this guy ever got to defending this country was going out and watching a Rambo movie. You know, so this is what's happened to the Republican Party. You've got that element. The 5 Republicans who voted with us to save the state of California 3 years ago when we needed revenue, so we got them to vote to increase revenue just a little bit, the vehicle license fee. They all lost when they went out for re-election. And these were legitimate. Roger Nilo from Sacramento is one of the most conservative members I knew, but he's a good person. He's a principled person who knew that by taking this vote, he ran for the state Senate. He's a very capable person. He lost because he voted for that. It was the right thing to do, and they knew it was the right thing to do, but they refused to do it. So there's that element of the Republican Party, one of the reasons I left. And the second is what George said, that people like Karl Rove don't think we're smart enough to govern ourselves. So when Karl Rove said, when John Kerry ran for the presidency, that by the time I'm through with him, they'll think that he was with the enemy in Vietnam, that he wasn't a hero, and they did that. So it's a twofer. They take this money, That's your money. They take your equity out of your house. They're trying to take your retirement funds, and then they use it against you. And it's a twofer for them because they think these Ayn Rand, objectivism, that you're not smart enough to govern, that they have to govern for you. Then they mislead you and lie to you with all this money, and then you vote against your own interests.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And, we can't let this happen in this country. For the generation that came in front of us, our parents are the greatest generation. Some of you in this room who risked their lives for democracy, and now in our lifetimes to see what's happening, this very jaded view of democracy, this is worth fighting for. And, thank God we've got George to fight for.
Okay, we're going to rip through the question. Who's number two?
Okay, number two, yeah.
You're going to rip through your question, and we're going to rip through the answers. Otherwise, we're going to get through 3 questions.
All right, too many questions. Yeah, well, last year, Chris Matthews said
Into the microphone.
Into the microphone. All right. Chris Matthews said when they were ruminating about how these right-wing Republicans could be that way, and he said over
You're going to have to speak up and speak into the mic.
Chris Matthews last year said, now, you can look at it that way, but it's not going to help. How about transparency in the vote? They control the voting machines in Michigan and in Ohio. I have a friend who lives in Michigan, and he swears that everybody in his precinct that he knows about voted for the Democratic candidate, but the Republican won. Now, how do we know it? He tried to follow the vote and go where they take the ballots. They've arrested him.
Okay, let me.
So
I can't comment on that because I
don't
don't know.
know, but what I'm saying is that how do we know that they're not engineering the elections so that the Republican will always win when they want him to?
Well, we know at the moment that there's huge voter suppression efforts going on all across the country, and the Attorney General has gone out after them. There's other organizations that are working in the states, and those states have gone to court to overturn that voter suppression. It's conscious, it's deliberative. They know exactly what they're doing with these ID laws. The fact of the matter is, as lax as our voting laws are, same-day registration, same-day voting in many states, voter fraud is infinitesimal. But they want to act like this is a huge scandal and there's millions of people who aren't voting, who aren't registered, and they're not voting legally. The fact of the matter is, that's not the case. They're simply using it because they know they need to depress the vote in certain states, otherwise they don't believe they'll be able to win the election. Next. Number 3.
Next.
Number 4. It's like Baskin Robbins. Number 5.
Jerry, please step to the center.
Time's up.
Yeah, I think that there are solutions to the problems that we're facing right now. I think it was really hard to overthrow a monarchy, which is what the founders of this country did. So I don't think that there are no solutions to the situation that we find ourselves in today. And I think that we've been in worse situations as a country. I certainly think what FDR faced, a Great Depression and a world war and tyranny, was much worse than what we have right now. But what I'm concerned about is what this town hall was advertised as, and that is the big money that we have. And one of the things that I think that Congress can do and isn't doing is, what I see is you've got people that work in congresspeople's offices. They do a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year stint, and then they go out and they go to K Street, or they go to Goldman Sachs, and they become lobbyists, and then they're there, and they're coming back into these congressmen's offices, they're writing health care law, they're doing things like that, and they're disenfranchising us. I think that Congress can write some laws making it illegal for people to do this revolving door, and I'm wondering why doesn't that happen?
Well, because I don't know. When I hire somebody, I don't know what they're going to do. I've hired probably, over my years, I don't know how many interns have come into my office, staff people have come into my office. I'm proud of most of them. I get, they're off working in the instances in the public interest, public sector. But the fact of the matter is, there's a limitation on what I can do here. I know the problem you're talking about. We put a limitation on members of Congress. You can't lobby for 2 years. The executive can't lobby for 1 year, whatever it is. The president won't have meetings with lobbyists. I mean, we've done those efforts. This is way beyond lobbyists. This is just cold hard cash in a campaign. That's what focuses the minds of an elected official. Am I going to get reelected? They don't have to deal with lobbyists. Karl Rove's not a lobbyist. The Koch brothers aren't lobbyists. They have lobbyists, I understand all that. But once they tell you that we're prepared to spend $1 billion, $1 billion in this campaign cycle, it focuses your mind. And if you're in a marginal seat, we have people who got elected to Congress in this last 2 years. They don't even know how they got there. They ran, they were in the Tea Party, they took the pledge, not the pledge to the Constitution, the pledge to Grover Norquist. They took that pledge, they raised $50,000 and they went to Congress. You had examined the race, $3 or $4 million was spent on their behalf, they didn't even know it. So this is way beyond this question of revolving doors and stuff. Whether somebody comes and, you know, somebody's at a university and they want to work in financial services and they end up in Goldman Sachs, you know, that's really about the judgment of the member of Congress. I can't outlaw that, and I shouldn't outlaw that activity. When they want to come back, people should ask, does this make sense? Is this right? Is this a relationship that shouldn't continue? Is this a conflict of interest? That's what we're supposed to do when we pick our staff or we decide who we're going to talk to and all that. But there is a right of people to petition. I meet all the time with people I very ardently disagree with. But I represent them. They live in my district. They have the view. You know, I don't say, well, you can't come in because you're from Goldman Sachs. You can't come in, you're from Bank of America. You can't come in because you're from Chevron. What about the people who work for them? What about what they contribute to the community? So these are tough issues. But just believe me now, this has shifted away from that. That is penny ante compared to what they're doing in elections. Because they know every day an elected official on a 2-year cycle gets up and thinks about, how am I doing? How am I doing? What's happening over there? But you're right. The title of this thing is still right. It's about money and politics. You know, if you didn't have this, we couldn't pass a campaign. You know, I've been for public financing, all these things, my whole life. Congress doesn't pass this.
And I know we got to keep going, but just one point. You know, in a term-limited world, I go to my Republican colleagues and I say, come on, you know this is the right thing to do. But Karl Rover's perfected not just these independent expenditures, but the psychology of my Republican colleagues, most of them getting the legislature sort of a pinnacle in their life. They represent their community, they came through the Chamber of Commerce. But the psychology to them is they don't only have these independent expenditures saying they didn't vote for taxes. They destroy their character. So it's a deliberate psychological profile, because I would sit up there and go, you know, we're term limited, take a courageous vote, you can live with yourself, you can go back to your business. And then I discovered, a couple of them told me, go to these websites that they're attacking us on. So the psychology is not just to defeat the incumbent, it's to destroy their character so that when they go back to Safeway, people look at them like they're some kind of child molester, and it's very powerful.
10, 11.
People
12.
from 11 to 30 who have questions, please step forward. What's your number? 6. 6. Come ahead.
Come on, step up. Let's go.
Number 6, step ahead. Anybody between 11 and 30, step behind them, like number 13, number 15, number 17. Step behind them. Just stand in numerical order like you're going to hop on the Southwest flight. Just stand in line in numerical order, please.
What good is all this?
Okay. I'm going to throw in time of convenience. Please discuss Buckley v. Vallejo decision, what can be done about it. But number 7. Number 6.
Yes, speaking of that,
Swallow that.
yes, I'm going to ask about the Deutsche Standards Amendment and the move to amend proposed
You got to describe it to me.
That's the corporations are not people. Money is not
financing. On financing.
Well, this is corporations are not people.
I've supported. I think I'm a co-author of the amendment.
Right. The difference between the Deutsche Amendment and the move to amend amendment, where the Deutsche Amendment has an exemption for non-profits.
I don't know. I'll get you the answer, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
All right. Well, what can be done to get some action on this?
Change the Congress. It'll never come up in the House of Representatives. No, I'm just saying that, that's what this election's about. Disclosure, financial disclosure will never come up in this Congress. public disclosure of campaign funds will never, the amendment to change it. You mentioned about Buckley v. Vallejo, you need to amend the Constitution.
Okay. Yeah, eat the microphone.
Okay. I've been to meetings of move to amend and David Cobb, and they highlight the flaw with the Deutsche Sender's amendment that it exempts not-for-profits, because they claim that if you do that, then for-profits and wealthy individuals can funnel money through, and then the not-for-profits can claim constitutional rights, which won't solve the problem. They say the only way to solve the problem is to not let any artificial entity, doesn't matter whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit, have constitutional rights. So were you aware of the move to amend amendment?
I just responded to that. I don't know the particulars of it. I'm aware that this is a problem with the Deutsche Amendment.
It's posted right there.
Okay, we'll take a look at it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've gotten word that the congressman's time is running short.
Let's go.
Okay,
Let's go.
Go for it. Eat the mic.
Eat the mic. Off the cliff.
Yes.
Taxes.
Yes.
Where do you stand?
I think that we ought to continue the tax cuts that are now in place for everybody up to $250,000, and for over $250,000, we ought to let the tax cuts expire. What that does, it leaves enough money in middle-income families and upper-income families so that you can keep some demand in the economy. But you pick up over 10 years, you pick up about $930, $940, $950 billion that I would use for deficit reduction. And you sort of get the best of both worlds, in that you're not entering into this idea of an austerity plan when there's no demand in the economy or very little, and you still get the long-term deficit reduction. And the economists tell us if you sent that kind of signal over a 10-year period of time to the markets, and you said this is the glide path for the deficit, and hopefully this is the glide path for economic growth, that the credit of the United States, a lot of things get much better at that point. I think that's the right compromise. It's what President Obama has suggested. It's being viciously rejected at the moment. I think it actually has a very good chance of passing after the election in the Congress. Yes.
My question is regarding the Glass-Steagall Act, and which was an act that separated investment banks from commercial banks so that gamblers could not gamble with people's deposits. That was on the books since the 30s, and it protected people, but now that was taken off. The Dodd-Frank does not correct that. And so what is your answer to that? You know?
I would put Glass-Steagall back on the books. They argue about over-regulation and regulations killing the financial services industry. Glass-Steagall makes a very different, just a very simple separation between what you can do with your depositors' money and what you can do with your own money. Right. You want to go gamble, go gamble. And I was one of only 58 members of Congress when it was repealed, to vote against its repeal. I was right then, and I'm right now. Trucks are looking at using this. You get less energy out of natural gas than you do out of gasoline. Some of the heavy truckers aren't sure they're for it. But you do have a chance with trucks on the interstate systems at truck stops to have fueling stations. Right now you don't have that kind of infrastructure. It's very good for fleets where the trucks go home at night at PG&E, they go home at night at UPS, they go home and they can be refueled and go for another day. So it's coming. It's part of the mix. A lot of people think that it's absolutely the future, and it's going to start the future. But you need the infrastructure, just as you need the infrastructure to recharge electric cars. You need the infrastructure to provide natural gas, and some of that is probably when the oil companies decide they can do it at their stations. It's not cheap. It's not easy. It's a big infrastructure project, but it's important.
The microphone.
Okay, thanks. I'm not here about a specific issue or concern, but I'm here to ask a question that I think many in this room might want the answer to, and that is that a lot of us are working hard, very hard as volunteers to get the president reelected. And we're doing a variety of things like phone banking and voter registration and hopefully door-to-door canvassing. And I'd like to ask both of you what the number one or two things you would recommend or you think we could do to really have an impact. Because I think many of us are frustrated at how to get the message out about how great he is and how to be sure we are making an impact as volunteers.
Well, the question on the campaigns is, as you know, since we have an electoral college, the campaigns are a constant effort to put together the critical votes in the electoral college. So they assume California, and so they're not going to spend their money here. They're going to raise money here, but they're not going to spend their money here. That's why a lot of the phone calling you're doing now is critical, because we need the turnout for these other issues, for Prop 32, for the governor's initiative. We need, and to elect Democrats, the turnout in the primary was the lowest since 1980, 89, I think, in the county here, in some parts of the state, you know, 17% in some parts of the Central Valley. We need that turnout, so we need those phone calls going in on behalf of the president, getting those people out, and hopefully they'll then vote for Democratic member of Congress, Assembly, Senate, however. And there's a lot of work going on in that between the state legislature and the Congress and others on critical districts. The other part of it, obviously, is the formula that was successful that many of you participated before, and that's where people came to the Obama headquarters around the county, and they called into Ohio, they called into Nevada. We sent buses full of people to go to Reno, to walk door to door, because it's a critical state. It's a critical state again this year. And so, you know, we're sort of bystanders, financiers of the campaign, but we don't see the campaign in terms of the message as clearly as, believe me. And that's why the president's doing well in the battleground states, in Ohio, in Virginia, in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, Pennsylvania, because they're seeing the message, because that's where the commercials are. You have to watch MSNBC or some other program, or go to YouTube and you see them after the fact. So we have a different role, but it's it really was the success of the president's first campaign, with that all of us were doing work, whether it was about our communities or not. A lot of this is about our communities because we need that turnout. But we also then, you know, when you can work a different time zone or what have you, that's what we're asking people to do. It's critical. It's critical to the turnout for the president. We don't need the same Obama wave. I mean, we'd love to have it, but we need a pretty good breaker. And I think the president's going to run strong. I think when the president runs as strong as I think he's going to run, I think then we have a chance to take back the House for the 25 seats that are in play there in the House. So there's just a lot riding on your activities. I know sometimes you think, well, I should be doing more here and there. They've got this thing mapped out pretty darn well for the president, and we need him running. We need him running strong. Yes.
George, are we going to be able to close the School of the Americas?
Well, we stay after it. Jim McGovern, myself, and some other people in the Congress, we continue to stay after it. They've renamed it, they shifted it, they've relocated it. It still exists. We're still getting the poor dismal returns on it in terms of, we keep thinking we're turning out, you know, democratically oriented members of the military in other countries, and it doesn't work out that way. Rarely does it ever work out that way, I must say. Yes, the military does then have contacts when bad things happen in the country. They have somebody to talk to, but that's not what they're telling the people. The goal of this is, it was to create a different kind of soldier and a different kind of commander, and it's been a pretty dismal return. But the Congress continues to support all things military.
We're counting on you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I wish I had more success.
Next. Come on.
Thank you. I have a simple question.
Well, those are the worst.
There seems to me to be a Republican strategy to deliberately drive down the economy before the election in November. This obviously is in order to reduce the number of voters who would likely vote for Obama. Do you concur?
As I said earlier, I think, yes, I think it's not so much what they've done, it's what they won't allow to happen in terms of legislation to create additional jobs, legislation to help out the housing industry, legislation to do infrastructure bills, these kinds of things where they've sat on their hands because they know that all of this diminishes the opportunity for jobs to be created. So yes, I arrive at the same conclusion you do, but I think a lot of it is not about what they pass, it's about what they refuse to let the Congress consider and pass.
Okay, Barbara, you're...
we're going to take these people standing and then we're out of here.
Then we're out of here, okay.
Southwest Airlines, I'm the pilot.
You defined Barbara, that's pretty good.
Eat the microphone.
Right. It seems to me that many talking heads and legislators and politicians have expected the economy to recover at the same rate that we have for previous recessions. And yet there have been some differences, and one difference is that we now have 7 billion people on Earth that want jobs. And the second difference is that it's been a while since I've heard anybody but a robot answer a phone, or when I look at an automobile line, I don't see people making cars, I see robots making cars. And my question is, I rarely hear you talking about that, and when I mean you, I mean politicians in general.
Yeah, well, we don't talk about it that much, but you're absolutely correct. You know, this economy is an economy that, as we know, certainly, you know, for the last 25 years has rapidly changed, and each recession has gotten a little bit more difficult to get out of. And in this recession, you are obviously in the middle of a recession where, in terms of our life experiences, technology is in full bloom. And so you have a combination of rapid onset of technology replacing jobs and outsourcing of jobs. If you want to know how serious the problem is, Foxconn, which employs like close to 100,000 people, I think, 10,000 in one factory in China, has just ordered 1 million robots. So they have the lowest wages, among the lowest wages in manufacturing in the world. They've decided to go the next route, which is to provide a million robots. So it's an issue that I spent a lot of time on myself as part of being chair of the Democratic Policy Committee and talking with people all across the country about this, because the fact of the matter is the next generation isn't just racing against their friends, their students in, you know, in high school and college. They're racing against technology. In fact, there's an interesting book, I don't describe it, it's all accurate, called The Race Against Technology, and it really discusses this rapid deployment and the integration. What we now see is this massive integration of technology, so things are accomplished that we thought wouldn't happen for many, many, many years, but they're coming together in these enterprise systems. So this is a serious question for this country. Yes.
Okay, I'm talking about jobs. And when we hear about jobs, and it's talked up about jobs, they're always, oh, we're going to build a highway, there'll be thousands, hundreds of jobs. We're going to build this, hundreds of jobs. Where are the jobs, and I understand we're all created equal, but where are the jobs that will allow women to work? Jobs that aren't minimum wage. Is there any way that Congress or legislature can offer some kind of tax benefit to companies that create jobs?
We do that. We do that. It's reasonably successful. It's not as successful as you would think. A lot of companies, in spite of all of the publicity, all of the effort, really will tell you that they weren't aware of it. I mean, we run into this all the time in meetings like this with small businesses and others. And one of the reasons I visit a lot of small businesses so I can find out what they're aware. I just walk in and say my name and ask them what they're doing. But you know, the Stimulus Act has been badly maligned. Most economists now on the left and the right agree created about 3 million jobs. I thought the stimulus package should have been larger, should have been $1 trillion, and less of it should have been put into tax cuts, because that's a very, very inefficient way to create those jobs. When we talk about an infrastructure bill, remember, it's not just the person putting down the asphalt or laying the concrete. It's the engineers, it's the architects, it's all the technical people that go along with that enterprise. Many of which today are more and more of which are women than were before. And clearly, the health care bill has created several hundreds of thousands of jobs since its passage, and will create many more. In fact, the schools, you know, in health sciences, the whole range of health care talent needed for the healthcare bill coming online. The community colleges, every school is oversubscribed, and again, that's an occupation that actually more men are now going into. It used to be sort of dedicated to women. Yes.
I just want to make one brief comment because you brought up career opportunities for women. This county is the only major county that has all women except for me representing it in the legislature.
And we can take care of that problem too.
So just don't think it's guys like us.
Fracking and the extraction of natural gas are environmental disasters, and I was surprised when you talked so glowingly about it. Shouldn't they be going toward more green sources of energy?
There's no question, no question. I spent my entire public life on green sources of energy and alternatives and renewables and the rest of that. But the fact of the matter is, unless this country does something very different, you saw what happened when we tried to encourage these industries. The president got his hat handed to him. Yeah. And not that every judgment was the right judgment, but without some encouragement, they're about to let the wind energy tax credit fall down. You will now lose manufacturing in this country if that happens because it needs the assistance. It needs a price built into it. That's what other countries have done to drive those green energy. But the point about fracking is this. I think if you begin by thinking about fracking, you can believe it's a disaster, but you can also believe it's really important certainly over the next 50 years in this country, maybe longer, that we have a domestic source of energy so we're not relying on nations, as we know, that are very hostile to us. We're sending huge amounts of money out of this country, and our industries are less competitive because of the high price. The question about fracking is where is it appropriate and who is doing it? When the fracking boom hit, a lot of fly-by-night operators went in. Instead of using the right gauge pipe to go down 8, 9, 10,000 feet, and to do this right, they saved money by thinner. This happens all the time. Thinner gauge. It broke down. It broke down in the middle of the water table. In many areas, the water table is separated by thousands of feet from where the fracking is taking place. And if you do it right, you can safely bring that to service. But you got to know the geology. You got to know about earthquakes. You got to know the chemicals that are being put in it. You got to know the operator. But everybody was so excited about the royalties they were getting, and they were buying farmers out all over Pennsylvania, and they were instant millionaires. They overlooked all of that, and then they had some real messes on their hands. Less and less of that is happening. More and more of that is because of the states, because of the political pressure in the states, where people are saying, "Wait a minute, let's take a look before we leave, and let's figure out what the geology is here and who's doing this business. Are they bonded? Are they insured? Are they going to make good? Are they going to clean up this mess?" And so, it's changing, but it was like the Wild West over the last 2.5 years. And now that's starting to change. This isn't about being glowing about it, but that natural gas supply looks to me better than the natural gas supply coming out of Saudi Arabia. I mean, that sounds very crass, and it's a very easy thing to say. But to me, that's really important, because I know how foreign policy gets influenced. And I know how many times we never say it. George Bush the first said, "We're going to Iraq because it's about jobs." No, we weren't going there we were going there to get those oil fields back for Saddam Hussein so he could send us the oil that we thought the Kuwaitis stole from him. It's always been about oil in this part of the world. And that case is always made. It's used to frighten the public. It's used in the Congress whenever we have we debate. I'd love to take that part of the argument off, so now we can talk about whether or not we should be sending people into these hostile environments. Yes?
I'd like to wish you all a happy Spare the Air Day.
Yes.
We are building enough thermonuclear bombs to annihilate the world.
Okay? We're not building many, but we have an awful lot to do it, and others are desiring to build additional nuclear weapons. We've actually been pretty good about getting our count down. We've got a long ways to go. The Russians have been more cooperative than ever before, but obviously Pakistan and India aren't partnering with us at this moment. They say they are, they're not. And then, of course, Iran is a big concern. DeSaulnier and the Gems. And we'll do this again. If you like it, let us know, and we'll be back. Traveling Road Show here, the Flying Pickle Circus.
We'll get back.
Pickle Family Circus. Family Pickle Circus. Thank you so much.
We'll stick around and take questions.